Donald Trump moves fast to revive the Keystone Pipeline, what it means for cross-border relations and Canada's climate commitments. Pipeline cleanup in Saskatchewan. Why did the province wait days to disclose this leak? Oscar nominations, no longer so white, and notably Canadian. Plus, 25 years ago, Roberta Bonder blasted into history with so much riding on her shoulders.
I look at it not as pressure, I look at it as the time to shine.
We haven't talked much lately about the proposed Keystone XL pipeline project. For years, it was a flashpoint between governments and environmentalists, oil producers and workers, and more, both in Canada and the United States. Remember this?
My view is that you don't take no for an answer.
Well, Canada got a no in 2015 from Barack Obama, who blocked the project. It was to carry crude oil from Hardisty, Alberta, to the Texas Gulf Coast. So now that Donald Trump has brought the project back to life, what does that mean for the Canadian portion of the project? Katie Simpson begins our coverage tonight from the Liberal Cabinet Retreat in Calgary.
We're going to renegotiate some of the terms, and if they'd like, we'll see if we can get that pipeline built.
And with that, the Keystone XL pipeline was given new life. Donald Trump's administration wants the project back on track as quickly as possible, as long as certain conditions to be determined by the president are met.
If we're going to do all of these things to expedite these projects that go over or under a piece of, U.S. soil, that the American taxpayers considered in this process.
The conditions didn't seem to cause any worry for the Prime Minister and his cabinet.
In both the conversations I've had with President Trump now, Keystone XL came up as a topic, and I reiterated my support for the project. We know we can get our resources to market more safely and responsibly while meeting our climate change goals.
Despite those conversations, no one gave Canada the heads up Trump was making this announcement today. Still, it is a sign of cooperation with the new U.S. administration. But the opposition wasted no time criticizing the plan over environmental concerns.
On Keystone, it's not clear why Justin Trudeau is pushing to revive a pipeline that will export Canadian jobs and has never been properly reviewed.
The Environment Minister says there will not be a new environmental review, even though the project was approved nearly 7 years ago.
This was a decision that was made by the previous government, and now it's up to the U.S. administration.
The next move is up to energy giant TransCanada, which confirmed it will reapply for a permit. If the project gets off the ground, it will be the third pipeline to move forward under the Liberal government.
If you add those jobs to the pipelines that have already been approved, then you're looking at literally 25, 30, 35,000 jobs for Canadians.
Trump's announcement could turn into an economic win for Trudeau. And after the positive discussion Cabinet had with a top Trump advisor at this retreat, it looks like the new Canada-U.S. relationship is off to a pretty strong start. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Calgary.
For a province that has suffered huge blows to its oil industry in recent years, the revival of Keystone XL would have a huge economic impact on Alberta, both in the industry and in spin-off jobs. But some wonder if it will all be too high a cost for the environment. Briar Stewart has that part of the story.
And where does Canada fit in all this?
The timing could not have been better. Today, a Washington-based consultant spoke to Edmonton's business community. His talk entitled, "The Trump Regime, Can There Be an Alberta Advantage?" But even he's unsure about whether Keystone XL will be built.
Right now, I would say probably 50-50.
Will Trump revive the pipeline project? He wants to renegotiate its terms and conditions. What exactly that means is unclear.
TransCanada is going to have to lead this file. It's their project, and they've been working it through the system to this point, and now they've cleared a hurdle. But there's more work to do, no question.
Keystone XL is expected to create a few thousand jobs in Canada and as many as 28,000 in the United States.
That brings about a different level of progress than what we've seen before.
Alberta Premier Rachel Notley says Keystone was never a priority as her government has been focused on pipelines that would bring Canadian oil to Canadian coasts. But times have changed.
We're not at $100 a barrel anymore. And so anything that will lift that price, that will reduce the differential and get more for our product and bitumen is something that the economy needs right now.
There will likely be more legal challenges, but this former TransCanada executive believes the project can overcome those.
I believe that the Trump administration would have actually done its due diligence in terms that these executive orders will pass muster against those. But yes, that is going to be a potential that could delay the project moving forward as quickly as possible.
Keystone has been a target of fierce protests.
This is what democracy looks like.
Late today, a few hundred people gathered in front of the White House, and some are wondering just how this new pipeline fits with Canada's environmental goals.
It certainly challenges the credibility of what Canada has committed to in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and Alberta with its climate leadership plan.
Alberta's premier insists that Keystone isn't about extracting more oil, but shipping it more efficiently to the U.S. But there is nothing streamlined about this project's fate, considering that it was proposed nearly a decade ago. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Edmonton.
As we mentioned, Trump also resurrected the Dakota Access Pipeline project today. It was to be built under a Missouri River reservoir near the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. Construction was halted in December. The move was a huge victory for hundreds of protesters who had camped on the site for months. At the time, the U.S. federal agency involved said it would explore alternate routes for the pipeline's crossing. The Dakota Access would carry crude oil from North Dakota to Illinois. The bosses of America's big three automakers met the president this morning. The message from the meeting, no surprise, build more cars in the United States. But what it means for Canada's auto industry is less clear. Renee Filipponi has that story.
It was all about America first and bringing jobs back to the U.S. as President Trump sat down with auto industry execs.
I want to just thank you all for being here.
He suggested ways to encourage U.S. investment, including easing environmental regulations.
He is very focused on policies that will grow investment and jobs.
Also on the table, plans to renegotiate NAFTA and talk of tariffs. And that raises obvious concerns here. What does Buy American mean for the Canadian auto industry?
That says that you want everything back in the States, so what does that do for us?
It's just more adversity for us.
The lack of clarity from the U.S. isn't making it any easier to predict consequences, but history can serve as a lesson.
The U.S. did introduce a Buy America program in the aftermath of the 2008-9 recession, and that did have a deleterious or negative effect on the Canadian economy,
including job losses. The Canada-U.S. auto industries are highly integrated and have been that way for decades. Manufacturers here say any tariff would hurt everyone.
Adding 20% every time it crosses, which on average for an auto part is 6 or 7 times, adds a ridiculous amount of cost.
Auto companies have already committed more than $1.5 billion for Canadian investment during the latest union negotiations. The question now, will that level of commitment continue?
Well, I'm not as concerned about it as others.
The union believes Trump's focus will not be on Canada, but Mexico and Asia. And that's because of cheap labor there and the fact they sell more cars to the U.S. than they buy.
We really do have balanced trade with the United States. We build more cars in Canada than we sell, but the majority of the parts come from the United States.
An aluminum prototype mold that we're building for Jeep.
For this Windsor area parts maker, the most important thing when talking about the future of the auto industry here is Canada an ally or an enemy in Trump's eyes?
I would tell him that the Canadian economy also sacrificed alongside the U.S. economy. So that puts us in the same category as ally.
A lot of questions weighing heavily on a big Canadian industry, as answers and clarity for now seem to be hard to come by. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, Toronto.
President Trump met with U.S. congressional leaders last night and he repeated his false claim that voter fraud kept him from winning the popular vote. That led one Republican to suggest Trump seems obsessed.
So I would urge the president to knock this off. This is the greatest democracy on earth. You're the leader of the free world, and people are going to start doubting you as a person if you keep making accusations against our electoral system without justification.
Graham said claiming unsubstantiated voter fraud will erode Trump's ability to govern the U.S. The Supreme Court of the United Kingdom threw a roadblock at Theresa May today, saying the British Prime Minister must get parliamentary approval to begin an exit from the European Union.
The Supreme Court rules that the government cannot trigger Article 50 without an Act of Parliament authorising it to do so.
Article 50 is the formal notification of intent to withdraw from the EU. Legislation could be introduced in Britain's House of Commons later this week. Coming up, Canada's Roberta Bonder shares an untold story from space.
I took all my clothes off and I tucked up in a ball.
Why on earth did she do that? Plus, should a university help to discredit psychiatry? It's the latest from our new Viewpoints series. The cleanup continues in southeast Saskatchewan tonight. A pipeline leak there left 200,000 liters of crude oil spilled onto mainly agricultural land. The oil was discovered a short distance from Stoughton on the Ocean Man First Nation. As Stephanie Skenderis discovered, people there smelled it long before the spill was found.
I'm a chief, but I don't like to.
Peter Bigstone is used to the smell of oil on Ocean Man First Nation. He says his water has smelled like it for years. He's worried about what a spill like this could mean.
I got a lot of horses here. I wouldn't want my horses to be affected by the drinking water that they have. And when that snow melts over there, how am I to be sure that it helped everything, all the oil spill?
Calgary-based Tundra Energy Marketing is paying to clean up the spill. It hasn't confirmed it's the company's pipeline that leaked, but says it's likely.
We are working with the environmentalists. They're doing air monitor testing on a regular basis. There's no potential harm to the public around us or environment. We've got everything kind of contained and fenced off, and so everything's good right now.
Tundra says it monitors its pipelines on a regular basis and did a flyby last Tuesday, but it was someone from the community who spotted the spill.
Tundra Energy Marketing says they notified the government of this spill on Friday when they heard about it. So the question now is, why did it take so long for the government to tell the public?
The province only announced there had been a leak on Monday afternoon.
The priority needed to be containing and beginning the cleanup, and also to determine and to ensure that there wasn't a hazard to the public or to waterways, to streams or creeks in the area.
But Tundra's pipeline isn't the only one running under Ocean Man. There are at least 3 pipelines here, some from the 1960s, and some worry this could happen again.
Wear and tear causes things to break down. I'm hoping that the company will be around to deal with the after effects or any residuals that arise from this incident.
The government says there will be an investigation. Stephanie Skenderis, CBC News, Ocean Man First Nation.
Israel has approved the construction of 2,500 new housing units in the West Bank. The announcement follows the approval Sunday of some 500 units in East Jerusalem. Palestinian officials denounced today's announcement. Last month, a United Nations Security Council resolution condemned the settlements. It passed when the U.S. decided not to exercise its veto. Of course, Washington now has a new administration. Russia, Turkey, and Iran have ended 2 days of talks aimed at solidifying a ceasefire in Syria. The 3 nations agreed to a trilateral monitoring body. The UN insists it should remain the conflict's primary dealmaker, but its representative to Syria said today's decision could be a helpful step forward. Only 12 people have walked on the moon. Today, the final man to set foot on its surface was honored.
An excellent aviator,
and an outstanding astronaut. Perhaps the best representation of a patriotic American this country has.
The commander of Apollo 13 was among those to pay tribute to Gene Cernan. He died last week at age 82. Cernan spent 22 hours on the lunar surface in 1972 and believed he held the title of last man to walk on the moon far too long. Ontario brought them in 3 weeks ago. Now, calorie counts on restaurant menus may soon expand, with some fast food chains set to post them nationally. The goal is to encourage healthy eating, but will it work? Health reporter Christine Birak has a look.
Some of the numbers are jaw-dropping.
Whatever I wanted was about like 900 calories, and I'm like, whoa.
Pizza, snacks, pasta.
We usually get this like Asiago penne pasta, and we didn't notice how much calories were in it.
Over 1,000, and you only need about 2,000 a day.
It was a lot of calories, yeah. So I was like, nope.
That's the guilty feeling, but sometimes you just don't care.
For chains with more than 20 outlets in Ontario, calorie counts are now mandatory. The province's health minister is proud to say some fast food and coffee joints are now posting them right across the country.
It's one more tool in the pocket of a consumer to allow them to make that informed choice, that decision, ultimately.
The question is, how much power do calorie counts really have over us? Public health experts say evidence from major American cities shows it depends.
It doesn't change people from unhealthy eaters to healthy eaters.
For younger or lower income consumers, price often beats calories. Still, some do shift.
It's really about 1/3 of us that actually use that information to change what we order.
And some will shift back over time. But experts insist the real benefit from calorie counts may not come from people changing their eating habits. It's from businesses changing their food.
A lot of companies look at those numbers and decide to reformulate. If they reduce the fat or the calories in what we're being offered, that can have a lasting impact.
A big pizza chain in southern Ontario says if calories influence sales, they'd look into it.
We'll have to dig into it a little further. Is it based on calories or based on something else? We haven't seen anything at this, it's kind of early still.
Shock value aside, perhaps the biggest criticism of calorie counts is that they don't tell you how nutritious something is. A bag of chips can have fewer calories than an avocado. So while most would agree that calorie counts are a good start, they don't often tell the whole story. Christine Birak, CBC News, Toronto.
If that whets your appetite for more information, you can join a Facebook Live session tomorrow. Just go to the National's Facebook page. Christine will moderate a discussion with 2 experts taking your questions on healthy eating. It's set to begin at 12:30 Eastern Time. Well, the short list of the year's best performances in film was announced this morning. It was Oscar nomination day. Canadians both in front of the camera and behind the scenes got the nod. And as Eli Glasner reports, this year's nominations may also reflect an important change.
Dr. Banks? Now that's a proper introduction.
From the eerie alien film Arrival to the buoyant blockbuster La La Land, Canadians were at the heart of some of this year's most nominated films. London, Ontario's Ryan Gosling whistled his way to his second Oscar nomination with the role of La La Land's struggling pianist. It was the sophisticated, artful direction of Montreal's Denis Villeneuve who brought Arrival to the big screen. While the Academy tends to shun sci-fi films, Arrival landed 8 nominations, including Best Picture and Director. Speaking from Los Angeles, where he's working on the Blade Runner sequel, Villeneuve shared the credit.
Basically, it was like 95%, 97% of the crew was from Quebec. So it's like a huge Canadian input in the movie. I mean, it's like it was made, it's a Canadian movie made with American money.
It's Maui time!
There was also Oscar love for Canadian animators. Moana, co-directed by Canadian Chris Williams, is in the running for Best Animated Feature, while in the animated short category, 3 out of the 5 films feature Canadian directors. But besides Canadian fortunes, today's announcement also signaled an important change. For the past 2 years, every single actor nominated was white. This morning, out of the 20 acting nominations, 7 were actors of color. Whether it's Moonlight's director Barry Jenkins or Arrival's cinematographer Branford Young, this year's Oscars has the potential to make history. Professor Darnell Hunt has been examining the issue of race in Hollywood before the hashtag #OscarsSoWhite started to trend.
It used to be that, the white audience was the main audience and everything else was icing on the cake or gravy, Not so in 2017, and certainly not so going forward.
Fire no! While the representation of female directors and Asian and Latino roles continues to be an issue, Hunt points to the success of the Fast and Furious franchise. With a multiracial cast and an Asian American director, it raced to the top of the box office, showing diversity is about more than the Oscars. It could be the industry's way forward. Eli Glasner, CBC News, Toronto.